like it?
No, I don't. Let me down, now.
No, God! No, God, please, no!
Please, for God's sakes, get me off of this thing.
Turn around, look at what you see in her face, the mirror of your dream. Make believe I'm everywhere, I'm getting in the line, written on the pages is the answer to a never-ending story. Reach the stars, fly a fantasy, dream a dream, and what you see will be rhymes that keep their secrets will unfold behind the cloud. And there upon the rainbow is the answer to a never-ending
Hello YouTube, my name is the Fat Kid on Quarantine and welcome to my movie review channel. Today we will be talking about The Never-Ending Story, a fantasy film released in 1984 by German producer Wolfgang Petersen and based off of the 1979 novel by Michael Ende. The film was originally released in West Germany and then distributed in the US by Warner Brothers. With a budget of 27 million and a box office of 100 million, the movie was considered a big success and spawned 2 sequels and an animated series. Unfortunately, as Professor Snape once put it,
Fame isn't everything.
and in the case of The Never-Ending Story, that definitely applies. This film, without a doubt, is one of the worst movies I have ever seen.
Oh, hi, thanks for checking in. I'm still a piece of garbage.
Not only does this movie deviate heavily from its source material, and in doing so completely missing the point that Michael Ende was trying to tell in his book, but it is also filled with grotesque imagery, very cheap-looking green screen effects, and arguably worst of all, a downright harmful message to those who watch it. As a child watching this movie, I did not feel any of the wonder or charm that it is supposed to evoke. Rather, I felt disturbed and creeped out. And today I will be talking more about this and why I feel this way about this movie. So if you're interested, come and join me. And hopefully together, we can bring this story to an end.
Help me! Help me!
After reading the book that this movie was based on and then rewatching the movie as an adult, I think I isolated my 3 main issues with it. These issues are the plot of the movie, the imagery of the movie, and the message of the movie. So I will take my time in breaking down each of these in the 3 parts of the video, starting with plot.
Run.
I have many issues with the plot of The Never-Ending Story. However, before we discuss them, let's actually summarize said plot. The main character of the movie is Bastian, played by Barrett Oliver. Bastian is a little boy with a big imagination. He loves to read books and pretend that he's one of the characters in them. One day, when running away from bullies, Bastian stumbles into a bookshop that contains a curious book called The Never-Ending Story. The shopkeeper warns Bastian that this book is not safe and he should not read it. However, Bastian, being the little kid that he is, instead steals the book and reads it on his own time. And on his own time, of course, means that he skipped school to read the book. The book talks of a wondrous land called Fantasia, a place full of mythical creatures and other wonderful imaginary stuff. However, it is being threatened by a force called the Nothing, a power that destroys everything in its path. person that can stop the Nothing is the ruler of Fantasia, the childlike Empress. However, unfortunately, she has fallen deadly ill, and the only one that can find the cure is the brave warrior Atreyu. He goes on a quest in order to find said cure, and takes with him the necklace known as the Orin, which is supposed to guide his way. As Bastian continues reading about Atreyu's quest, he himself unknowingly becomes part of the never-ending story, and in the end it is Bastian who saves the childlike Empress's life by giving her the name Moonchild and stops the Nothing. The movie ends with Bastian triumphantly bringing Fantasia back to life and going on to have many wonderful adventures. And this is where the first problem is. Because of this happy ending that disregards the entire second half of the book, more on that in a moment, the movie loses out on the real meaning that Michael Ende was trying to say. You may be wondering, well, how can the movie that's made for kids and with such a happy ending be so bad? Well, allow me to demonstrate. The second part of the never-ending story sees Bastian actually physically transported into the world of the book and have his own adventures there. In the words of the anime community, this is known as an isekai. Bastian becomes the protagonist of his own story and gets the power to wish whatever he wants into real life. Now that sounds awesome, but unfortunately, whenever he wishes for something, he loses a memory of real life. The problem is that Bastian has no idea this is happening, and he keeps having adventures and wishing for stuff to happen until he loses pretty much every memory he ever possessed except for the name of his father and the name of him as a person. So he has some more adventures, he ends up losing the memory of his father as well, and then he nearly loses the memory of himself. And if that were to happen, well, it's not explained well, but apparently he would have stayed in Fantasia as a sort of ghost spirit sort of thing. So he ends up gaining his memories back and returning home to the real world, all grown up and accepting of himself. So that's the ending of the second part of the book. Basically, Bastian learns to grow up, he goes through this experience and accepts that he is a real person, that fantasizing is okay, but he also needs to understand that reality is also important. But that doesn't happen in the movie. None of the second part of the book happens in the movie. And so instead of getting the journey of Bastian's self-realization and learning self-worth, instead we get to follow Atreyu's journey, which while visually could have been enjoyable for some people, it wasn't for me, but it can be for some people, is still only secondary, because Atreyu is not the main character, even though it seems like it, and Noah Hathaway does a good performance as him. No, the main character is Bastian. And Bastian does not have any development in the movie. Despite him coming out of his shell and finally doing what he dreams at the end of the movie and saving Fantasia, that's not really the point, because he already was doing this anyway. He wanted to steal the book and he stole the book. He wanted to skip school and read the book instead. He skipped school and he read the book instead. He felt like doing whatever he wanted throughout the movie, and he did it. So there really isn't much development for him as a person, which is in fact the point of the never-ending story as a book. And when the entire second part of said book was skipped, the meaning of the book was skipped as well, which was unfortunate and made me kind of apathetic toward the movie in general when I rewatched it. But if you thought skipping the entire second half of the book was the only issue with the plot of this movie, oh no, you are very definitely wrong, because there are still a lot of things from the first part of the book this movie gets wrong. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that taking some creativities with the book is a bad idea, because a lot of movies do that. They do take creative rights with their source material, and they turn out quite well. A good example would be the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But in this case, the result was bad. Let me explain why. In the beginning of the book, Bastian is very uncomfortable with himself as a person. He is a chubby kid with glasses and no friends. And while the movie gets the no friends part, it completely ignores the chubby and glass part. In general, they completely skim over the fact that Bastian is uncomfortable with himself as a person. Hugely important to the book. And also should have been hugely important to the movie, because that is what drives Bastian to discover himself and discover his self-worth throughout the narrative. But this doesn't happen, because there's no indication in the movie that Bastian is uncomfortable with himself. Instead, the only issue with him seems to be that he's extremely shy. While him being shy is fine and all, taking only one trait from an entire character and making a new character around that one trait is a problem. Because of that, Bastian appears to be very one-dimensional in the movie, and I don't care about him when I should, because he's supposed to be the main character. Another part of Bastian's character in the movie that is only mentioned but not explored, which is a problem, is the fact that he's grieving over his lost mother. Now, that could have been an interesting point. It could have been a way for Bastian to develop. It could have been a way for him to learn to let go. It could have been a way for him to learn to grow up a little bit. But instead, it is disregarded after the only scene it is mentioned in. It is forgotten, and as a result, I once again don't care, even though I most likely should, and that detail is most likely important. However, I can't bring myself to care about it, because it is not mentioned ever again. So why should I? Instead, we get to watch the sad death of Artax, which actually happens on screen, so now I care more about this horse than I care about the mother of the main character. But speaking of Artax's death, let's move on to the imagery and symbolism of the movie. You know what I really think constitutes as a red flag? Well, yes, that too, but what I really meant was when the author of the book your movie is based on hates your movie. A humongous melodrama of kissed commerce, plush, and plastic, he said scathingly. It was, he declared, a cross between E.T. and The Day After. And they felt misled and taken advantage of by the production company, and decided to withdraw his name from the production. In a statement, he announced that he was officially distancing himself from the film and requested that those scenes that contradicted the inner logic of the story should be cut from the final take. Very interesting. Let's take a look at some more criticisms. The Sphinxes are one of the biggest embarrassments of the film. They are full-bosomed strippers who sit there in the desert, and they went to his grave in 1995 still hating the movie based off his beloved book.
I get it.
I don't get it.
Oh hell no! Look, I understand that back in the day, kids' films weren't afraid to show off more than they do now, and to a certain degree, I even agree with that. But this is full-blown nudity, guys. Come on, like, who thought this was a good idea? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Fantasia is supposed to be the land of human imagination, and a lot of people are very perverted, so...
Mind blown!
Oh my god. This makes perfect sense. Of course these things look like full-bosomed strippers. Everything makes sense. People are perverted. My god, Wolfgang Petersen was the visionary. This is 10 out of 10. Amazing. This is a bad movie.
You're letting the sadness of the swamps get to you.
Yes, your anguish sustains me.
Perverted sphinxes aside, there's a lot of other stuff in this movie that looks weird and creepy and I don't like it. Like Falker the Dragon, for example. Alright, look, I know he's a beloved character and I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate for saying this, but he is creepy, okay? You know all that weird Greek mythology where you'd have these animals that, like, their first half is like one animal and their second half is another animal. And you'd have like a manticore, which is like the head of a lion, and then you'd have the tail of a scorpion, and you'd also have bat wings, and then you'd also have like the Cerberus, which is like a three-headed dog with like a snake tail, and then you'd have, I don't know, the Hydra, which is like snake heads and a body of like a monster, and then there's a lot of other stuff, and you know, all those, like Falkor looks like one of these animals, alright? He has the head of a dog, which I think is like a golden retriever, but I'm not sure. And then he also has the rest of the body like a lizard, but albino. nose, so it's even creepier. But yeah, low-key, Falkor looks ridiculous, and he's not supposed to. He's supposed to look cool, because he's on the center cover of the movie, he's supposed to be like a dragon, he's supposed to be this embodiment of children's imaginations. And dragons are supposed to be amazing. They're supposed to be these mighty creatures that burn down villages with their all-powerful flames, or they're supposed to be capable allies that help out the knight in his epic journey or quest. They're not supposed to be Clifford the big white lizard labradoodle. You know, in the book, Falkor actually looked like a proper dragon. Maybe not like a European dragon, but he was supposed to look like a real Asian dragon. He had horns, he had a lion's mane, he had red eyes, and he had the serpentine body. And that actually looks kind of cool. I wouldn't mind seeing that. But no, instead we get this. And I know what you're about to say. Well, you know, this is 1984, this movie's budget wasn't that big, of course Falkor doesn't look perfect, what'd you expect? Now hold on a minute, let me show you a dragon from a movie made in 1964 with a budget of only 1.3 million. Hold on a second. Did you see that? Did you see that? That came from a movie made 20 years before this one, and with a budget that was 10 times less than this one had. So why does it look amazing, while Falkor looks like something that crawled out from under my bed? And don't even get me started on the moments when he's flying around. I mean, look at this. This is the most unconvincing green screen that I have ever seen. Those moments when Falkor is flying and Atreyu or Bastian, whoever it is, are on his back cheering are supposed to be one of the most triumphant or wonderful moments of the entire movie. They're supposed to be the crown jewel of it. But it's just not. Even as a child, I was like, what is this? Look, I understand that this movie isn't Avengers Endgame, and it's no James Cameron's Avatar. It's nothing like that, but it does have a pretty sizable budget. It has 20.7 million, which adjusted for inflation is around 60 million right now, which places it at the top of the most expensive movies ever produced in Germany list. And that actually says something, so when I watch it, I expect a little bit better than what I actually get. But of course, Falkor really isn't the only problem with the visuals of this movie. This movie looks cheap in a lot of places it really shouldn't. For example, there's this one thing called the Southern Oracle in the film, and it's supposed to be a place of great importance. So I expected maybe a temple or a shrine or at least a wise man at the top of the mountain, but instead the Southern Oracle is just the Sphinxes except blue. And honestly, it's so stupid. It looks like they just took the model of the Sphinxes, put it in a different green screen, colored it blue, and we're done with it. I can just imagine the pitch meeting. It's like, one guy's like, alright guys, we should build a temple-like structure and make that Southern Oracle. And the second guy should be like, no, it should be a mystical spring of water, and whoever drinks from it learns the secret of the universe. And then the third guy's like, alright guys, remember those Sphinxes? We should just give them frostbite. And then everyone looked at that third guy and they were like, give him a raise, this guy's a genius. And you know, I could go on and on about the way this movie looks because there's honestly quite a lot of problems with it, but in the end, I gotta say that even if a movie doesn't look too good, sometimes if the message that it's trying to spread is truly from the heart and truly meaningful, then we can put its appearance to the side. Does the Neverending Story have a good and meaningful message?
No.
Mine.
And here we come to the crux of the issue. A movie that's simply bad because of its plot or because of the way it looks can often be laughed at or made fun of. It can maybe become a cult classic in its own way. It can be elevated to the status of so bad that it's good, as, for example, Killer Clown from Outer Space, or perhaps Korean Tron. But a movie that's created with a deep meaning in mind and uses its message, its philosophy, and its look in order to communicate something to its audience cannot be treated this way. It cannot be simply laughed off. If the message in question is good and profound and teaches a valuable lesson to its viewers, then the movie in question can save some, if not all, of its decency. It will not be a perfect movie because, of course, plot and appearance are also very important to filmmaking, but it won't be bad in a sense. It will be maybe average. However, if the message in question is not good, if it's not profound, if the message in it is not valuable, if the lesson it teaches is harmful, then it becomes something much worse than simply bad, much more than simply stupid or disappointing. It becomes a travesty. It becomes an actual blight on filmmaking history. It becomes an abomination of everything that film, that movies, that this form of art, this form of media stands for. And if this travesty is based off of something else, not only does it reflect poorly on itself, but it reflects poorly on its base source as well, which is probably one of the reasons that Michael Ende despised this film, because he had every reason to do so. This movie is so awful that it actually dishonors the book. It spits in the face of everything Michael Ende tried to create, of everything that he tried to say. It's so bad that I feel actual disgust whenever I watch it. Audible, real disgust.
I hate you!
In order to understand why the message of the Neverending Story is so bad, we must first take a look at the villain of the movie. Now, as I mentioned during my analysis of the plot of the film, the Neverending Story's villain is this force known as the Nothing. And it is a power that destroys everything that it touches. It's sort of a black hole. It sucks in everything that Fantasia is. Its creatures, its landscape, pretty much everything. And it leaves, well, nothing behind. Henceforth, it's called a Nothing. Or at least that's what it appears to be. However, there are clues scattered throughout the movie that give away its true identity and what it truly is. The biggest of these clues actually appears at the end of the film, where the Nothing is defeated. And the way the Nothing is defeated actually gives us confirmation on the Nothing's true form. So, allow me to elaborate. So, at the end of the film, it appears as if the Nothing has won. Despite Atreus' best efforts, it has destroyed Fantasia, and the only thing that's left standing is the home of the childlike Empress, the Ivory Tower. So when Atreus gets to the Ivory Tower, the childlike Empress explains that the reason for his quest was to get in contact with Bastian, who is reading the book. And as he was reading the book, he was slowly getting immersed in the book as well. And then she, through Atreus, addresses Bastian himself, and she tells him to do what he dreams, because if he doesn't do it, the Nothing will in fact destroy the Ivory Tower and herself as well, and then Fantasia will be doomed forever. And in a scene that's supposed to be super cathartic, Bastian finally does what he dreams, and he gives the childlike Empress her new name. Finally, after accepting that fiction is real, he destroys the Nothing. So basically, Bastian vanquishes the Nothing by believing. Which doesn't seem so bad, except then you realize that the person that instilled into him the idea that he needs to keep his feet on the ground was his own father, the main adult figure of the movie. So basically, the true form of the Nothing, what it really is the apathy of adulthood. It is the boringness that comes when you forget what it's like to be a kid. And Bastian's father is a representation of that. He is the one that tells Bastian at the beginning of the film not to dream, to keep his feet planted on the ground. And in a way, that portrays all of adults in a negative light, because apart from the shopkeeper, the only adult in this film is Bastian's father? Well, there's also Morla the turtle, but she's also portrayed as an apathetic being that doesn't care about anything. So, honestly, pretty much every adult character in this film is portrayed in a negative light. So, that is what The Nothing truly is. And this is where the problem is. Because what this movie does is suggest that adults are in a way avatars of the nothing. They're these soulless beings that don't believe and that simply don't care about imagination. The way Bastian wins, the way he triumphs at the end of the film is by rejecting reality, by accepting that fiction is what matters most. So basically, in conclusion, this movie suggests that by growing up, by living life with your 2 feet planted on the ground, by living in reality, you reject everything that would make you creative, that would make you dream, that would make you imagine anything, and you become part of the nothing. You become this boring piece of the gray masses. Not losing your imagination and creativity is definitely important, but it cannot come at the cost of rejecting the responsibilities of adulthood. The book understands this, and because of that, the second part exists. And in the second part, Bastian is transported into Fantasia physically. He's fully immersed in Imagination Land. And the more time he spends there, the more he forgets about what it's like to be real. And because of that, he nearly dies by the end of the second part, and he is forced to go back. He realizes that reality is more important. And, he grows up this way. But the movie completely disregards that. The movie instead goes like, who cares about reality if you can ride a magical dragon? Who cares about reality if you can save a princess stuck in a tower? Who cares about reality if you can fight giant wolf monsters? This film simply doesn't understand that growing up is a part of life. It is inescapable. You don't have to lose your imagination or your creativity by growing up. Look at everything that adults have done. An adult wrote The Never-Ending Story. An adult wrote Lord of the Rings. An adult made goddamn Dungeons and Dragons, guys. You don't have to lose the spark that you possess as a child when you become an adult. But you have to accept that you cannot spend all the time in Magic Land. You need to spend time in real life as well. Because otherwise you'll become a wraith, like Bastian almost did in part 2. Otherwise you will be nothing. You will sink into delusions, and there's no escaping from there. And that concludes my analysis of this movie. Now if you excuse me, I have to go be a boring adult and play some Magic the Gathering. I bid you adieu. Thank you for watching my movie review video. If you enjoyed it, please click that like button, click that subscribe button, click that notification button, click all the buttons. And don't forget to leave a comment so I can improve my videos as I go along. As all of you know, the holiday season is soon coming up, so I will have something special planned for that. Until then, this is the Fat Kid on Quarantine, signing out.
Give me a new name.
Name is John C.